Welcome to bgrlearning.com, and this is part 2 of my series, Why Unity in Marriage Has More to Do with the Wife Than the Husband. And this is based upon an article I wrote for my blog, biblicalgenderals.com, back in 2013 on this subject of unity in marriage. So the title of this part 2 section would be, why does biblical unity put so much more responsibility on the wife than the husband? So here we're getting to the crux of the question, because in the first part of this, in the first part where we just introduced this concept, we talked about ways that a husband can and wife can become closer. Those 5 steps of how they can become closer. We talked about, the need for a husband and wife to have regular sexual relations. We talked about that a husband needs to know his wife. We had talked about the fact that a wife needs to submit to her husband, and that she should offer advice in ways that are not contentious, right? And then we also lastly talked about that a wife is to be her husband's crown. That means she's his greatest cheerleader. She does not bring shame to him. She brings him glory. Because remember, 1 Corinthians, the concept of the woman being the wife, being the crown of her husband, and a crown brought glory to its wearer, is reflected in 1 Corinthians 11:7, where it says that a man ought not to cover his head, for he is the image and glory of God, but the woman is the glory of the man, right? So that's what the woman was made to be man's crown. She was made to be his glory, to bring him glory, just as man brings God glory. So, but now this brings us back to the crux here. Why does biblical unity unity in marriage? Why does it put so much more responsibility on the wife than the husband? And the answer is found all over the scriptures. Whether it's Ephesians 5:22, Ephesians 5:24, Colossians 3:18, Titus 2:5, 1 Peter 3:1, 1 Peter 3:6, God tells wives to submit to their husbands in all these places. Contrary to Christian feminists and egalitarians' readings, husbands and wives, we're talking about Ephesians 5:21, where it says submit to one another. That is not talking about marriage. That's talking about people within the church, equals within the church, brothers and sisters within the church. If you look at the context of that verse right ahead of it, it's all talking about behavior within the church. And many scriptures and even conservative Bible preachers make the mistake of including that in the discussion on marriage. Paul is switching gears now. He talks about submission in verse 21 within the church. That's the servant, mutual serving type of, because there's 2 kinds of ways that word in the Bible for submission is used. There's 2 ways that it's used. One is a submission of equals to one another, a serving type of submission, serving one another, okay? And then there's the military version of submission, which he switches to in the context of how he uses it in the husband and wife. And it's easy to see, because it says husbands submit unto your, or wives submit unto your husbands, as the church submits to Christ, as the church submits to Christ. Okay? Is Christ an equal with the church? No. Therefore, we know that the submission that it's talking about is not a submission of equals. If he just said, wives submit to your husbands, and he didn't say, as the church submits unto Christ, okay? If you didn't talk about that and compare that, do that direct comparison, you maybe you would have an argument there. But you don't, because of the comparison of Christ and the church. Christ and the church are not equals. The husband and wife are not equals. So the submission is not a submission of equals. It is a military submission of one in authority over another. So that is why unity in marriage is so much more dependent upon the wife than the husband. I mean, yes, like I said in the first part of this series, a husband does bear some responsibility in the sense of that he's supposed to know his wife. Okay, absolutely, we talked about that extensively. But just like, okay, let's equate it to the military, because that word for submission can be a military term in the scriptures. Is it good for a commander to know his men underneath them, to know their strengths and weaknesses, to know what makes them tick, to know their concerns? To know, yes, absolutely. Okay, and that does lead to good unit cohesion and unity. Okay, of the men with their commander. Yes. However, the bulk of how a unit underneath its commander is unified depends upon the men following the orders of the leader and knowing that if I don't follow them, there are consequences. Think about how military order would fall completely out of disarray if there were no if you don't do what your lieutenant says. It don't matter. Nothing happened to you. No consequences. He can't say anything to you. He can't do anything to you. Think about that. And like I said in the previous part one of this series on unity in marriage, that we have gutted, the church has been complicit in gutting the authority of husbands that can help with that unity. Yes, they need to know their wives, but they need to have enforcement powers as well. That when the wife is not acting in a unified fashion with her husband, that he can take action and correct that. Okay, and we don't allow that anymore. We just say no, 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 no. She's responsible for God to her for herself, and he's responsible for himself. No, 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 no. We can't allow that. Okay, so the point here is that this submission is critically important within marriage, and this is why just like ladies, think of it in a military unit. Where's the most important part for the unification of that unit? Is it the commander compromising with his men underneath him to try and get everybody to, okay, what can we all agree on to be unified? Is that it? No, it's not. It's the men molding themselves to their commander, knowing how their commander thinks and how he operates and what his philosophies are, and molding themselves and anticipating what he's going to say and what he needs and what he wants them to do. Ladies, that's why in marriage, yes, it is a biblical fact that unity comes down much more to the wife's behavior. Not 100%, but I'd say probably about 80%. Okay? To the wife's behavior toward her husband, to her molding herself to her husband. This is so crucial for Christian wives to understand this, that yes, ladies, it's more falls on you than him. If you're having trouble in your marriage, if you're fighting all the time, 8 out of 10 times, it's probably, and no one's going to say this today in our modern church. We can't say this. Everything is 50-50 or it's all the man's fault, but never more the woman's fault. The fact of the matter is, in the majority of marriages that are experiencing trouble, if you checked it out and you interviewed them and talked to them, you will find out it's because the wife isn't following her husband. The wife is arguing and being contentious with her husband. The wife is trying to change her husband rather than changing herself to fit him and to follow him. She's trying to change him constantly. And that's why they have fights, and that's why they don't get along, and that's why there's tension in the marriage. And that's why we have so much divorce today, folks, is because women are not doing what God designed them to do. They are not molding themselves to their husbands. They are not realizing that the majority of the responsibility for the unity in marriage comes down to the wife, not the husband. That is the teaching of the scriptures. And you need to get rid of this modern thought process of equality, and our humanist society worships equality in education. And thou shalt not sin against equality, as was once said at a Democratic convention. Sorry, folks, but that's not in the Bible. My Bible says, "Thou shalt not sin against the Lord thy God." Okay, the Bible says, "You shall not have any other gods before Him." The Bible says, "Submit, wives, submit unto your husbands as unto the Lord." God is not concerned with women being equal with their husbands. In fact, that would break His design, ladies. That would break His design if you were to become equal with your husband. Does that mean, now when we say equal, I always have to preface this, does this mean that your soul is not of equal value, that you're not equally saved? Of course not. Does it mean that you're less human? Of course not. Does it mean it's less egregious in God's sight when a woman is abused or murdered than a man? Of course not. These are all the things that humanists will throw out there. Oh, you're treating someone as less than human if they don't have the same rights. That your humanity is based upon you having equal rights with all other people. Okay? Yes, now are there certain rights that all human beings share? Exodus 21 actually lists the most basic human rights that even slaves had. Okay, so there's certain human rights that, yes, all people share, but we don't all have all the same rights. We share certain basic ones, but then men have more rights than, and corresponding responsibilities, not just rights, but men have more rights and more corresponding responsibilities than women, and women have more corresponding rights and responsibilities than their children, or than children do. And so the Bible is clear on this, that this structure. I've talked about it many times on my blog, that the whole idea of the adult, women are adults, men are adults, that's a made up social class. The Bible doesn't recognize the social class of adult. It recognizes the primary social classes of men, women, and children. Okay? Men have different rights, women have different rights, children have different rights. Okay? Those are the primary social classes. Okay? And then, of course, because of sin in the world, because of war and poverty, God allowed for a fourth class of slave that is allowed. That's a different subject. I've talked about that. You can look on my YouTube channel. I've addressed that thorny issue. I don't think we can shy away from it as Christians. It's used as a battering ram against us. We can't do that. But I don't want to go down that rabbit trail. The point here, though, is that as wives, you need to take this to heart. You bear the brunt of the responsibility for unity in your marriage. If there is disunity in your marriage, 80 to 90% of the time, it probably falls to you. Is there a small percentage where it might be the husband just not making any effort to know his wife at all, to not know anything she knows about the kids, to not know, not to do what God commands him to do in 1 Peter 3:7, to dwell with her according to knowledge? Are there some men that are very abusive, that don't treat their wives as fellow believers? Yes, there are some. Okay, that don't honor her position as his wife and the mother of his children. Yes, I'm not denying that. But if you're honest with yourselves, the vast majority of the problems that we see in marriage today are because women are not practicing these principles. That women think it is their husband's responsibility to create unity with them by compromising with them, and by, hey, with 50-50, you would do something. That's not, I'll do some things my way, you do something, we'll come together. That's how we'll be unified. No, you ladies were created for him. You were created for your husband. 1 Corinthians 11:9. That should be etched in every woman's head, in her mind. That should, every morning she gets up when she's married. Neither was I, as a woman, or neither was my man, my husband, created for me, but I was created for my husband. That is what you should be thinking about. That is what should motivate you throughout the day. When you get mad at your husband because he didn't do something for you, okay, you're betraying that philosophy. You're going, no. You exist to serve me. You exist to take care of my needs, to meet my needs. But the opposite is true. God created you to serve him. And that's what your marriage should reflect. Now, yes, he serves you through leading you, through providing for you, through protecting you. Yes. So men serve their wives in that capacity. But the woman was created to serve the man by bearing his children, caring for his home, molding herself to him, by being his crown, by being his greatest cheerleader. That's where she was created to do. Okay? So, thanks for listening to this part two. I know it was a lot shorter than the first one there, but I wanted to separate this from part three, where we're going to talk about in the next section here on unity in marriage and why unity has more to do with the wife than the husband. We're going to talk about practical ways that a wife can mold herself to her husband. So thanks for listening. May God be with you. May God bless you, and come back for the next part in this series.